On this Tuesday night, new promises of weapons to Ukraine. What NATO and non-NATO countries are offering to help Ukraine defend itself.
We've got to move at the speed of war.
As Russia intensifies shelling, warns of World War III, and the head of the UN goes to the Kremlin. Plus, we're on the ground in Kyiv with the head of Ukraine's national security. Delayed shot for kids. As COVID-19 infections rise among Canadian children, what's the status of vaccines? And Canada's joining the party.
It is probably the best competitive experience that isn't involving sport.
The song contest that captivates millions in Europe prepares to cross the pond.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. There are a number of developments we're following tonight on Russia's war in Ukraine. The West is upping both military assistance and rhetoric. The U.S. hosted military officials from more than 40 countries today, including Canada, at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, seeking to accelerate the supply of weapons to Ukraine. The U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who said yesterday the goal is to weaken Russia, today said Vladimir Putin never imagined the world would rally behind Ukraine so swiftly and surely, and he pledged to move heaven and earth to be sure Ukraine defeats Russia.
But we don't have any time to waste. The briefings today laid out clearly why the coming weeks will be so crucial for Ukraine. So we've got to move at the speed of war.
And at the Kremlin in Moscow, the UN Secretary-General met Vladimir Putin. António Guterres, across that long table, said he was there as a messenger of peace. We'll have more on that encounter and the outcome of the meeting of defense ministers in Germany in a moment. But we begin in Ukraine with our Europe Bureau Chief, Crystal Goomansingh, who has been speaking to Ukraine's head of defense and security. Crystal?
Donna, Oleksiy Danilov told me that foreign intelligence predicted that Russia would capture Ukraine within 3 weeks. Now, he says that victory is not yet in their pockets, but Ukraine is proving to the world that Russia can be defeated, something he says no one thought possible before February 24th. This bullet-riddled armored car belongs to one of the most influential men in Ukraine. Oleksiy Danilov, the country's national security chief, proudly showed Global News the image, explaining that early on in Russia's war here, everyone was donating vehicles to the war effort. At least his had protection.
We
realize that there are big battles ahead.
The ongoing fight for the east and south of Ukraine, Russia's intended target, will be intense, says Danilov. Danilov doesn't hold back. He calls Russian forces terrorists and says he's bewildered by the fact that Russia is still a part of the G20 and has permanent member status on the UN Security Council.
How
can you sit at a table with them? Should we invite Al-Qaeda or Hezbollah as well? Let's also invite the people who captured Afghanistan.
He says everyone knows Russia plays by its own rules. 4 times since the full invasion began, he has had to go to Volodymyr Zelensky and warn the president about possible assassination attempts.
His reaction is annoyed. Oh, again, he says. But I have to tell him.
Whether or not this war will become one of attrition, Danilov says the West can help make that decision by sending the right defensive weapons. In terms of the use of chemical weapons or nuclear weapons by Russia, that is a possibility, and Danilov says they are working to stockpile medicines such as iodine pills. Donna?
All right, Crystal Goomansingh in Kyiv tonight. Thanks. Germany said today it aims to find an alternative to Russian oil, which it relies on heavily, within days. And it's made a major shift in its defense policy. It is sending anti-aircraft tanks to Ukraine. 50 Gepard tanks armed with radar and anti-aircraft cannons will be delivered to the Ukrainian military, reversing a long-standing policy of not sending weapons to conflict zones. Germany had said it would only provide humanitarian aid and medical equipment. There is more detail, too, on Canada's contribution and the warning from Russia's foreign minister that the West is engaged in a proxy war with his country that could escalate into nuclear war. Abigail Bimman reports.
NATO defense ministers met at an American airbase in Germany Tuesday, discussing more weapons for Ukraine.
And today, Canada announced that it will send Ukraine 8 armored vehicles.
Canada's defense minister says that contract was just finalized and vehicles will be sent as soon as possible.
We will continue to not only send weapons from the inventory of the Canadian Armed Forces, but we are also moving to enter into contracts with defense suppliers for weaponry for Ukraine.
The U.S. sending more aid too, now up to $3.7 billion.
Ukraine clearly believes that it can win, and so does everyone here.
That's quite extraordinary that the nations have come together, that there are no leakers among the group. It's very unlike the Iraq War, where there was a lot of dissent.
In fact, more countries may be trying to join NATO. Finland and Sweden, both with long-standing military neutrality, are mulling a bid to join NATO. And as its members meet in Germany, the United Nations Secretary-General is in Russia, pushing for ceasefires and humanitarian corridors out of Mariupol.
I'm concerned about the repeated reports of violations of international humanitarian and human rights law and possible war crimes, and they require independent investigation.
The UN said Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed in principle to allowing the UN and Red Cross help evacuate Mariupol. While Russia's foreign minister raised the spectre of nuclear war on state TV, saying there are serious risks and dangers.
It's unhelpful and dangerous to rattle sabers and speculate about the use of nuclear weapons.
A reminder of the stakes here, an unmistakable warning that Russia is still a nuclear power and that there is always the possibility of escalation. I take it largely as the same sort of distorted rhetoric that we've seen coming out of the Russian leadership.
Sergei Lavrov also accused NATO of being engaged in a proxy war. Meanwhile, Canada's defense minister will head here to Washington later this week, where she'll meet U.S. Defense Secretary Austin. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Washington.
The number of people fleeing Ukraine is expected to double from the previous UN estimate. The UN Refugee Agency estimates 8.3 million people will flee Ukraine this year, Europe's worst refugee crisis since World War II. At this point, roughly 5.2 million people have fled the country, mostly women and children. The majority have gone to Poland. Another 7.7 million people are displaced within Ukraine. And a final note on Ukraine tonight, a symbol of severed friendship. This statue in central Kyiv was a gift from the Soviet Union in 1982 as a symbol of the relationship between Russia and Ukraine. Well, the mayor of Kyiv says after 2 months of war, it's time to dismantle it. In Ottawa tonight, a rare special joint committee of MPs and senators is reviewing the federal government's use of the Emergencies Act last February. At the time, Ottawa said protesters blocking borders and occupying the area around Parliament Hill were causing Canada economic harm. A Global News analysis of cross-border data shows that overall, trade was relatively unaffected by the protests. David Akin explains.
When the Ambassador Bridge connecting Windsor and Detroit was shut by protesters, Canadians worried about a huge economic hit.
The blockade of the Ambassador Bridge has affected about $390 million in trade each day.
The blockade may have affected that trade, but it does not appear to have stopped it. Cross-border trade data recently released by Statistics Canada shows that shippers found a way around the blockade. This graph shows the number of Ontario U.S. truck crossings in February, and sure enough, truck crossings at the Ambassador Bridge ceased for the 6-day-long blockade. But this line shows truck crossings at all other Ontario USA crossings, and it's clear trucking operators quickly rerouted to other bridges.
What I was a little surprised by was that we didn't see an effect even for the perishable goods, the food, fresh vegetables, which was really an area of concern.
As to the fears at the time that the blockades would cause long-lasting harm to the Canada-U.S. trading relationship, well, this auto industry analyst, he's not concerned.
U.S. and Canada are going to remain strong for the near future at the very least. I mean, again, it's 30 years of progress on integrating these supply chains. It's I don't think going to be undone by 1 week on the Ambassador Bridge.
Still, the public safety minister will make the case that the blockades caused Canadians to suffer.
I would just really draw a bright line between statistics and what Canadians were experiencing at the border, to say nothing of the fact that here in the nation's capital, the community here was laid to siege as a result of the occupation.
Conservatives say the trade data cannot be ignored.
I think it undermines a lot of the government's arguments in relation to the justification for imposing the Emergencies Act.
That trade data is going to get lots of scrutiny, and not just from this special joint committee of MPs and senators, but also from the judge tasked with leading the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act. And that inquiry gets underway later this year, Donna.
All right, David Akin in Ottawa, thank you. The university once known as Ryerson is changing its name to Toronto Metropolitan University. The renaming process began last year after protests over the school's namesake. Edgerton Ryerson is considered one of the primary architects of Canada's residential school system. The university says the new name reflects the school's location in the heart of Canada's largest and most diverse city. There is more detail about the upcoming visit to Canada by Prince Charles and his wife Camilla next month. They'll be here from May 17th to 19th as part of the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Clarence House says they'll focus on learning from Indigenous peoples and on living more sustainably. They'll stop in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and visit Kitiviti Harbour, then travel to Ottawa, where they will visit the National War Memorial, meet members of Ottawa's Ukrainian community, and take part in a reception at Rideau Hall. And then it's off to the Northwest Territories to meet community members in Yellowknife and visit the Detta Ice Road. This will be the 19th visit to Canada by Prince Charles and Camilla's 5th visit. The takeover of Twitter coming up, the social media giant's uncertain future as Elon Musk prepares to take charge. Plus, the wins keep on coming for Canada's Jeopardy champion. Life on Twitter is not real life, but it sure had a lot of people buzzing today. Some users are looking forward to Elon Musk's takeover and his promise of free speech. Others are leaving the platform, fearing what a billionaire with complete control will do with it. Mostly, there's uncertainty about what the future holds for Twitter, as Eric Sorensen reports.
Like him or not, no one can deny Elon Musk thinks big. But when he created SpaceX and Tesla, the motivation seemed clear-cut. Fly to Mars, build a better car. But Twitter is something else. Musk says he wants to promote free speech.
It's important to the function of democracy.
But democracy means power to the people. And Musk's takeover of Twitter means he will have all the power to shape its future.
It's going to be interesting to see how he's going to balance tackling the issue of misinformation and then also, keeping freedom of speech alive.
Musk is a member of the American Civil Liberties Union, but the ACLU sees a danger, stating we should be worried about any powerful central actor having so much control over the boundaries of our political speech online. So will freer speech mean more disinformation and hate speech?
This stuff exists there now.
Carmen Celestini studies hate and social media. Watching the reaction on Twitter, she says, some are cheering Musk, some will quit the platform. But on balance, it's a publicity win for Elon Musk.
He's getting all of this press and publicity, people returning, some people leaving. I think that we have to understand that disinformation is going to exist, and it isn't something that one platform or one individual can control.
Twitter is used by politicians, newsmakers, and the media, so it is influential. But it's not the most far-reaching social media. Facebook has almost 3 billion monthly active users. Twitter ranks 15th, far behind the likes of WhatsApp and Instagram.
Beyond the media and politicians, it doesn't have that much clout around the world. It has high-profile clout, and that's a very different thing, which is why it's valuable. But it's not as big as people think it is, and that's what he's got to work on, is growing it.
Many of the biggest companies have turned themselves into media giants. Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and now Musk with Twitter. The sales pitch may be for free speech, but it's also business.
If you have access to people's eyeballs, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, whatever, you do have access to people's dollars and their wallets.
Elon Musk promises to bring greater transparency to Twitter. Many users are just waiting to see clearly what he plans to do with it. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Ahead, the children who still can't get vaccinated. How can parents protect them?
You're watching Global National.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has tested positive for COVID-19. She says she has no symptoms and she's grateful to be vaccinated. Harris just returned from a trip to California. The White House says she has not been in close contact with President Biden or with the First Lady. Some of Canada's pediatric hospitals are reporting an increase in COVID-19 infections among children. There is still no vaccine approved for children under the age of 5. As Jamie Maraca reports, physicians say parents have to find other ways to keep their kids safe for now.
Ottawa's Children's Hospital is facing a double whammy. Staff are out sick with Omicron, and 2/3 of kids coming into its ER have COVID symptoms.
So what we're seeing specifically with this wave is now increased emergency volumes, levels that we're typically seeing at the height of viral seasons.
Out of more than 53,000 cases of COVID reported between April 10th and 16th countrywide, over 3,000, almost 6%, were kids under 11. Delays in data entry and testing restrictions mean the actual number is likely higher, and recently removed health measures such as masking in schools and daycares aren't helping.
We are in an Omicron wave where kids are getting infected like crazy. There's no more restriction to try to protect them.
Mother Julie Lajoie has seen her children through 2 bouts of COVID while waiting on Health Canada to authorize a pediatric vaccine for kids under 5. And the regulator says it has yet to receive any submissions from drug makers.
The majority of kids have milder illness, but there are some kids that can have significant illness, and some kids have long-term illness.
In March, Moderna reported its 2-dose KidCove vaccine was around 40% effective at preventing infection. The company says it plans to file for emergency use authorization in the U.S. by the end of this week. But experts believe the FDA will want to see data on 3 doses.
What they're looking for is to make sure that if this vaccine is indeed given to children, does it still work against the type of coronavirus that's currently in circulation?
Pfizer says the results of its 3-dose clinical trials will be ready in the coming weeks. What it couldn't say was when it plans to ask Health Canada to approve the shot. For parents, the wait is infuriating.
That vaccine is not there, and now there's no kind of protection, community level protection that can help to protect them. So parents feel isolated for sure.
Left to fend for themselves and take precautions on their own. Jamie Maraca, Global News, Toronto.
Next, plans for a Canadian remix of the world's biggest song contest.
You will add $5,500. Wow, a tidy sum today, $32,700.
Well, the good times keep rolling for Canadian Matea Roach. The 23-year-old Jeopardy champion has won 15 games in a row now and has more than $352,000 US in the bag. That's the 10th highest amount in the quiz show's regular season history and the highest of any Canadian competitor. Well, if you've ever watched the Eurovision Song Contest, and millions have, you know what a spectacle, sometimes an outlandish one, it can be. It attracts more viewers than the Super Bowl. And since 1956, international performers have belted it out for the top prize. Now, as Redmond Shannon reports, there are plans for a Canadian twist.
When ABBA won the Eurovision Song Contest for Sweden, it propelled them into superstardom. Every year, nations compete like this to see whose song is the catchiest. Although many countries simply aim to be the craziest. It's as much about the look as it is about the hook. How about a turkey in a shopping cart? Or some ear-splitting Finnish death metal.
We are the winners of Eurovision. We are.
These guys didn't win, by the way.
It is probably the best competitive experience that isn't involving sport, but has all these countries coming together, competing with music. It's inclusive, it's fun.
Big spectacle and big audiences, almost 200 million TV viewers annually. Countries can choose singers and songwriters from anywhere. Celine Dion won representing Switzerland in 1988, and that was the most famous Canadian involvement Until now. Eurovision Canada is launching to find a top tune from the 10 provinces and 3 territories.
We have such incredible songwriters in all of our territories and provinces in Canada.
Producers aim to capitalise on an important part of Eurovision's huge appeal.
12 points go to Albania!
L'Albanie, 12 points!
The voting format means any underdog has just as much chance as a big name or voting bloc.
We're being really aware of the fact that some provinces in the country have obviously a much larger population, but we want this to be a fair competition. So we're looking closely at how we do that.
Watch out, Ontario, Yukon is coming for you. And remember, it pays to be a friendly neighbour. British performers have routinely struggled to secure votes since Brexit. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
That is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Thunder Bay, Ontario. Beautiful sunset. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to us. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.